After 18 weeks of pain, half a dozen doctors, and a surgery date booked at one of the top clinics in the country, Clayton Young moved a wedge in his insole, went for a 10-mile run, and felt nothing. No pain for the first time in 4.5 months, went for a 10-mile run and felt nothing. No pain for the first time in 4.5 months. Today, he takes us inside what those 18 weeks actually cost him, emotionally, spiritually, competitively, and what it taught him about the thing most injured athletes never do: take full ownership of their own healing. In this conversation, Clayton is raw, he's honest, he talks about the moment a doctor said he might not ever be able to run again or run at the level that he had experienced before. And this is coming from a guy who's won an NCAA championship, made an Olympic team, and done some of the biggest things we've seen at major marathons in quite some time from an American. This is the training partner of Connor Mance, an athlete of Coach Ed Eyestone, an absolute legend who shares his training, his racing very honestly on his own YouTube channel, of which he's chronicled his different buildups throughout the years. And he's actually my second ever podcast guest. We go so far back, almost 6 years ago, that you couldn't even find that episode if you tried. So it's an honor and a privilege to welcome Clayton Young back on the podcast 700 episodes later, after one of the hardest moments of his career. And we talk about what this next chapter will look like and how he plans to bounce back better than ever before. If you enjoy this one, give us a 5-star review. Hit the follow button so you don't miss more impactful, honest, raw conversations with the top athletes in the sport of running on this page. And make sure you share the podcast with a friend or someone who you think would find value and benefit from it. With all those notes aside, enjoy this raw and honest conversation with guest 2 of the Running Effect podcast, and since then an Olympian and one of the fastest marathoners in U.S. history, Mr. Clayton Young. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined by a familiar face, but someone that a lot of you might know has been on the podcast. Clayton, for the last 5 years, I've gotten DMs to get you back on, and what they don't know is you were, I think, the second ever guest of what has now become a 700 episode show, and I had no clue what I was doing at the time, so I don't even think you could find that episode anywhere because I was just on YouTube at the time. I don't know where that episode is. So this is round 2 for us, round 1 for most of the world, and we were just talking a second ago about how much our lives have changed over the past 5 years. So first off, thank you for coming on the podcast when I was a nobody. I think it says a lot about your character, and thanks for joining me today, 5-6 years later.
Yeah, what an honor to be on. Yeah, and I do remember those days, 5-6 years ago, and yeah, when you were just starting out. Like it's amazing how much you've grown, your platform and your voice, and the people that have been on the podcast since, right? Like it's just been quite the journey to follow from my perspective. So congrats to you on all the success you've had.
Thank you, man. And likewise to yourself. You've had a dominant last 5 years, and that's kind of where I want to start. You win NCAAs, that one race kind of changes your life. You go pro, you sign with ASICS, and you and Mans kind of take over the marathon scene. And after the Olympics, you started to hit some roadblocks, some injuries, a lot of what you're coming back from that we'll talk about today. But I want you to relate to the listener, because I think a lot of people, when they're in an injury, they think, will I ever get back to where I was? Did you have moments of that question over the last year of overcoming some of these injuries?
Yeah. For those that don't know, like I'm pretty much 4 or 5 weeks coming off of what is probably the worst and longest injury of my career. I was injured for about 18 weeks. And, when you first get injured, you never know how long it's going to be. You think you're going to kick it like the next day. If you've been in the sport long enough, I feel like you kind of have to learn to ignore certain aches and pains in running to kind of get through it. And so this was just kind of one of those injuries where I was like initially like kind of just ignoring, and it was actually my left foot pain. And I've been dealing with this left foot pain since like 2017. So it's like pain that I've had for a long time, but I always been able to manage it, kind of ignore it. It's been fine. But this time, like it just didn't go away. And so what ended up being just kind of this little niggle that I'd trained through, ended up lasting 18 weeks. And it was really tough. I'm not going to lie. And yeah, there are definitely moments, I essentially talked to half a dozen PTs and half a dozen doctors. And the last doctor I talked to was actually a surgeon, and we were planning on going to get surgery at the Stedman Clinic in Vail, Colorado. And just that week, I had also talked to one other doctor, and essentially kind of came to the conclusion with him, like, he kind of sat me down. He showed me my MRI images and he said, "Hey, this is your problem." And he pretty much like said, "Hey, I'm sorry to tell you this, but like this problem right here, which is in your talonavicular joint, is potentially going to like be with you the rest of your career and may be the end of your career." And but luckily, after speaking with that doctor, I kind of had this moment of inspiration, to be honest. And I was like, well, based off of what I see, it's not something that he told me. It's just kind of some inspiration that I had that I should move essentially this wedge that was in my insole. And I moved it and went for a 10-mile run, and it was kind of like out of nowhere. And it was kind of weird. Like I was like, wow, that's the first 10 miles I ran pain free in 17, 18 weeks. And I was like, this is wild. And I waited 2 more days and I ran 10 more miles pain free. And I had that conversation with the surgeon, and I was like, you know what? I'm considering surgery, but you should know that I just barely kind of changed some things and started having this kind of pain-free running experience. And from that, he was like, well, like if you get surgery, it's going to be at least 5 months. Like it's going to be at least 5 months of you getting back into shape and rehab. And so honestly, like if you're running pain-free or even at least a little bit pain-free, like you should take that and you should run with it. Like you should go and try to see if you can still train at a high level. And so that's what I've done. And it's only been up from there. And that's kind of like the short condensed version. I mean, we tried everything for the injury, as everyone knows. Like there's so many modalities now for injuries, whether it's like shockwave or PT or PRP shots and ultrasound and wedges and insoles and red light therapy. Like I tried it all, and you never know what's going to work and what's going to stick, and you kind of have to put in and learn your own injury before you can really I don't know, fix it. Anyway, that's the short and sweet version of it. And I guess for the listeners, the one thing that I would say when it came to like approaching my injury is like there's always this point where I wanted to put responsibility in the hands of the doctors, or I wanted to put responsibility in the hands of my coach or PTs. And usually it's about halfway through an injury cycle when I finally start to realize like no one's going to care about this as much as I do. No one's going to like really dig into it as much as I do. And I need to take ownership of it. Like I need to learn everything I can about this injury. And so I'm like Googling and chatting and I'm like doing all these things from an anatomy standpoint and like diving into deep research just so I can understand it, because ultimately my ability to not only understand my injury, but communicate that with the doctors and the PTs and all those people that want to help me, like that's when I really start to see progress and growth. And you kind of want to deny it for a long time. Like you want to like
denial's the first step of acceptance, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I essentially, you have to go through that cycle a couple times before you finally admit it.
Take me into that hospital room, getting the MRI, and the doctor says essentially you might not ever be able to run again or run at the capacity that you've been running at. As someone who has had such a historic career, but yet you're young enough where that's probably just the glimpse of what you can do. What went through your heart and your mind when he said those words?
Yeah, my first thoughts actually went to one of my teammates, Kira D'Amato. If anybody's been following Kira D'Amato's career, she's had a really long career, pretty successful college career, and then kind of stepped away from the sport, became a mom, realtor, DJ. Like she became pretty much anything she wanted in this life. And then she came back to running and set the American record in the marathon. And anyway, recently she's been dealing with some injuries as well, and hers are a lot more severe than mine. And she actually did end up getting surgery through the Sedman Clinic and had this hip surgery. And it's funny, like she's pretty much like been a month ahead of me. And so my first thought was to like went to her and how like resilient she's been and how like she's really been a light to our group, even with this really, really bad hip injury that she's had. And so that's what I was thinking a lot of. And then, I don't know, like part of me also flashed back to 2023. So in 2023, I got knee surgery, and when I got knee surgery in 2023, it was in February of 2023. Like, this is the year before an Olympic year. This is essentially 1 year out from the Olympic trials. And I remember thinking like, wow, this is the worst time to be getting knee surgery, when like fitness stacks year upon year, month upon month, and going into that. But if anything, that knee surgery taught me like that was essentially a turning point in my career. It was like right after that, that's when I, hit the Olympic standard. That's when I made the Olympic team. That's when I was top 10 at the Olympics. That's when I then was top 10 at New York and Boston and the World Championships. And it was like, it was the start of a new career rather than the end of it. And it was like, well, if I can go through like knee surgery once, like I can go through foot surgery. And it was kind of like this almost sense of gratitude as well, knowing that, we're still in 2026. We're still 2 years out from an Olympic year. And if there's any time that I should be going through this, like now's the time. And maybe there's something that I need to learn and to figure out and to master. So that way, when the stakes are high, when it is, the Olympic trials or the Olympic Games, that I know how to handle it. Because you think about even in 2025, like I ran Boston and I ran the World Championships. I'd already ran 2 marathons that year. Like this injury kind of happened right in the sweet winter spot where, yes, I did want to go to Valencia. Yes, I did want to break the American record after Connor broke it. But like at the same time, in a way, this is the time to learn. This is the time to grow, to get me ready for the Olympic cycle.
I remember in our first conversation, faith was a pivotal, moment in that discussion. I grew up Christian. I'm still Christian to this day. So, I clung on to someone who was open about their faith because I feel like even back then, more so than now, it was like less culturally accepted to talk about your faith. It still is in some circles, but I feel like in certain circles, it's actually affirmed, which is amazing. As we talk about our faith in you living, wanting for something more, how do you grapple with sort of, a lot of your identity is put in the sport. It's minimally your full-time profession. It's how you feed your kids and your wife. And you hear from a doctor that like, hey, your source of meaning for the last multiple years, decade, you might not ever be able to do that again.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I've been through this identity crisis multiple times. And so I was maybe a little bit more prepared for it. Well, I knew what was coming and I thought I'd be more prepared for it. But you're right. Like from a standpoint where running, yes, it is my career, it is my job, it is my livelihood. But then, yes, it is also, maybe not only my identity, but it's also like my outlet and my drug, you could say. And from an emotional standpoint. And yeah, when you take all of that away, it can be incredibly difficult. And, I kind of had a warning of that when I had my surgery in 2023. It was probably the lowest part of my career and honestly my life. Like I was in a very depressed state. And so I was ready for that going into this one, but it's still, because it was so much longer and there were so many more cycles. Like I probably went through, I don't know, 8 to 10 cycles where I thought I was in the clear and then I'd have to, circle back and start from ground zero again. It was still incredibly difficult. And you talk about faith and, it's easy to have faith when things are going well, when, things are clicking along and you can see the hand of God in your life. But it's a lot more difficult when maybe things aren't going your way. And you're right, like when your identity is maybe a little bit compromised. But at the same time, I feel like, you have a choice. You have a choice in that moment, whether to turn away or to turn towards God and our Savior, Jesus Christ. And so I kind of had a choice, to be honest. And there were some really cool moments where I got to choose to, lean on the Lord a little bit more and lean on my family, who's become a big rock in my life. Not only Ashley, my wife, but my girls. And, they pay attention more than you think. And so, your name starts coming up in their prayers, and your random ankle, and like you're running. And I think there was a big part as well, like because it was around the Winter Olympics, like my girls are starting to understand the Olympic Games. They didn't really understand that much in 2024, but like my daughter Lucy's going to school in first grade, and they're learning about the Winter Olympics, and she's realizing, she's like, oh, my dad was in that. And so here all of a sudden, like my daughter out of the blue is praying that I make the next Olympic Games, and like things like that. And it's just like, it's really inspiring. And I pride myself in being a very independent person, almost too independent. And I don't like to burden people. And you could say that, this injury has allowed me, or kind of forced me to be a little bit more vulnerable to those that are close to me, and with God, and just kind of plead and mourn with what has been going on in my life. And in a way, it's hard not to think like, oh man, running is so just simple. It's so like there's so many more problems in this world, right? Especially now, with just us being so exposed to what's going around in the world. And it's like, does God really care about my dumb ankle and my running professionally? Like, it just seems so insignificant. But I've often been reminded time and time again, like, honestly, that yeah, God does care. He cares about the little things. He cares about your choices. He cares about your dreams. And yeah, he loves you. And whether you're a faith believing person or not, I think there's more people in this world that care than you know.
Love it, man. Off of your sort of, there are so many more problems in the world. Funny, actually, the first ever podcast guest, Alex Osberg, now assistant coach at Nike. You probably raced him back in the day. Very close friends with him, and we'll send each other podcasts back and forth, and send him like a 3-hour podcast from Dire of a CEO with these 3 nuclear war experts going back and forth on Iran and the US and just global conflict, Russia, China. Yeah. And I got to the end of it and I sent it to him, and I was like, wow. I listen to things like this and I realize how hilarious my life is, that I cover a sport where you put one foot in front of the other. And I think sometimes those examples help you to get out of your own way and to think like, my life matters and what I do matters, but also like, holy cow, I take myself too seriously in what I do. And I think there's freedom in having a childlike joy and wonder that we got into the sport with, most of us. Just like, you kind of smelling the flowers, running for the popsicle at the end of the run, like just that spirit of like joy and like, this doesn't really matter, but it matters because it brings me joy,
Yeah. It's kind of been nice, like, because everything has been stripped away with this injury. Yeah, I essentially get to have that childlike joy again, because there's pressure to perform and there's pressure to get back to where I once was. But, at the end of the day, like, I can only do everything that I can do. And so it just becomes, I guess out of injury comes this deep sense of gratitude that is born, essentially. Like, you're grateful for every step, and you're grateful for every mile, and you're grateful for every run and workout. And it's like you something that you took for granted becomes that much more valuable. And then also just this idea, like, everybody's had that feeling when you first start running or coming back from an injury, where it just seems like you're getting fitter by the mile or by the minute. And it can be very rewarding. Whereas, if you're at a very, very high level, those gains are so much harder to notice and to recognize. And it's hard to see progress, essentially. Whereas, because I was so injured, it was like everything was progress. Anything was, and it was just fueling this fire of this joy of running, right? Of like, oh yeah, this is why I love running. And it's way better than sweating and cross training on an arc trainer or being in a boost treadmill or confined in a space or doing rehab exercises. Like, it's hard. It's easy to forget that during all those moments. And man, it feels so good once you're back.
Amen to that, man. You had mentioned, Connor setting the American record, wanting to lower it, yourself as you're undergoing this injury. Connor's kind of still lighting the world on fire. And I've talked to him multiple times. I had him and Kylie on the podcast at one point. Like, he was crushing it. I know he's come back from injury now, but as honestly as you want to speak to, I don't want to put Connor down. That's not my intent with this question, but how hard was that? Like, I think a lot of people in high school specifically can relate to like being the third man on varsity and being injured, and then 4 and 5 run faster than their 5K PR. And they know they probably would have been up there because it was a fast course and they missed out. And it's a hit to the ego. Was that hard at all, seeing his success? Obviously, you're rooting for him. You want him to have that success, but also you're an athlete, you're a competitor, and you want what's best for yourself as well. Can you take me into that dynamic?
Yeah, it's very nuanced, and yeah, I think it comes down to, once again, this choice. Like, it's not that I don't have those feelings of like envy and jealousy and like wanting to beat Connor and that, like, man, like if he can do it, I can do it. Like, but it's like either I can have those feelings or I can have the feelings of like, and I want to be careful here too, because I think Connor stands alone, but in a way I can almost take a little bit of a sense of pride knowing that, this is a dream and a goal that we've talked about for years and years. And it's something that we've been on many a run, and we've been like, man, we want to set the American record, or we want to make an Olympic team, or we want to, podium, or these things. And so like, I can take a little bit of credit knowing that I've been part of that process and that success that he's had. And that is really satisfying. And that's kind of the mentality that I've chosen to have. While also knowing that it's a very small piece. It's a very small sliver. Right. And do I think that maybe I've made the difference of Connor setting the American record or not? No, but like, it's cool to be part of that journey. And I think ultimately, like, Connor and I have had to make the choice throughout our relationship time and time again of like how we want our relationship to be. Because our egos can get in the way, and they have gotten in the way. And there have been moments of difficulty, but ultimately I think as I've recognized that we're better together, that we have different strengths and weaknesses, and that we can push each other, like, that's really something that I've decided to hold on to and that I firmly believe in. And like, if Connor is having success in running fast, then that just means that, I get to, like, my next race, I get to have the chance to be successful and run fast as well. And it's almost validating. And there's a deep sense of accountability there. Like, I think of like, when Connor made the move at the Olympic trials, it was like, of course I'm going to cover that move because I've worked with him day in and day out, and I know I can cover that move. And there's just so much value in that. And, but yeah, I think for sure, like, when Connor, the plan was for me to go run the world championships, and then for Connor to set the American record in Chicago. And then honestly, the plan was for me to then go to Valencia and break the American record. Like, that was the discussions that Connor and coach and I had. And so it was really disappointing to like have this injury get in the way and to not have that opportunity, because those opportunities are so rare. But at the same time, it's like I said, like, I think there were really valuable things that I learned in this injury, and that will set me up to navigate future problems in my career. And it's better to get them out of the way now than in the future. And so, yeah. And honestly, like, I will say this, like, Connor, like, he deserves it all. Like, he's worked so hard for those goals and those dreams. And like, he inspires me and pushes me daily. And I'd like to hope that I inspire him and push him too. And, but yeah, it's a little bit of give and take. And yeah, I'm excited to see like how this next couple of years go. Because it's going to be interesting as like Casey Klinger is thrown into the mix, and like all these other young marathoners come and go. And it's, there's the pressure is, yes, Connor and I are probably the favorites right now, but there's a lot of guys coming.
every year it seems like, I mean, I don't want to discredit him, so apologies if he's listening. I don't know his last name. Ethan Schuley, was that his name?
Yeah,
A
surely, Ethan
great
surely.
example. I don't think anyone, if they're being honest, listening today, knew that guy's name a year ago, 6 months ago. So it's even between now and the trials. I think it's going to be fascinating to see what names pop up. And that's the beauty of our sport, man. And this is why I wish we had like a sort of like F1 attention on our sport with Netflix. Is the names that pop up are amazing. Like you said, you and Connor at the top, but I'm sure in your mind it's like, okay, we got to stay on it because guys, that we have the target on our back, and we've
Totally.
raised the ceiling. Like, I mean, that's what I love about being a fan of American distance running right now. Is a couple of years ago it was like if you ran 210, you were in the conversation, and now it's like, oh, you better be in like 206, 207 shape to have a shot.
100%, 100%. And it is this tricky balance of like for sure keeping a radar on those that are up and coming. But one thing that I will say that Connor does phenomenally well is he focuses on those right ahead of him. Like he's not thinking about top American. He's thinking about how can I podium at Boston? How can I win Boston? How can I set the American record and be the fastest ever to do it? And I think that forward thinking mentality is super important and something that Connor's definitely brought to the table. And yes, but yeah, I mean, Connor and I, it's funny. We know Ethan Shirley really well. He trained at BYU briefly, and then trained with us over the summer briefly, and
That
we know his
explains
family
it.
really
There we
well.
go.
Yeah, so we um, yeah, but we talk like even we talk about Matt Rickman, we talk about Bias and Bossa, we talk about all these guys, and they're on our radars, but it's always like yeah, we respect them, but ultimately what we want to do is not be the best in America, but like contend for, you know, being one of the best in the world. And I think that mentality has served Connor really well and has rubbed off on me.
It's a great perspective. I've never heard of it or thought of it in the marathon, but if you talk to the 5K guys or the 15 guys, like Grant Fisher and Cole Hawker, them winning a U.S. title at the trials is checking the box. So then they get the chance to win gold at the world
Yeah, yeah,
stage. Like they
yes,
care about the U.S., but I don't really think they do to the same extent. I
totally.
love and again, I think that's a shift in American distance running for men. That was not the case 5 years ago. It was
Yeah,
like Olympics is take my pick with LeBron James and Sam and Olympian, but I'm not even gonna come close to top three.
yeah, yeah. You nailed it. Yeah, that's those conversations right after the Olympic trials between Connor and I think were really foundational and just we were ranked what 60 and 65th going into the Olympic Games, and yeah, do we just go and take our picture with LeBron, or do we try our best to represent Team USA? And I think you know, for those that don't know, like we knew that 208 in every other Olympic year got you on the podium, and that's what we targeted. And it was a really tough course, arguably one of the toughest courses in Olympic history, and we still were able to run 208. And sadly, it didn't land us on the podium, but like the fact that we went for it, that we had a shot, I think is something that I can be really proud of.
You had mentioned a few minutes ago getting back from injury, trying to learn the lessons so you don't maybe have to relearn them down the road. And I've seen studies and personally I've experienced when you're in this cycle of injury, getting injured is way easier. And when you're in a cycle of health and you have consistency of health, it's way easier to not get injured. So what are some things you're trying to be mindful of as you move forward that you're hoping will keep you healthy and consistent?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of the biggest like lessons I've learned, for those that don't know me, like I'm a pretty nerdy guy. I have a mechanical engineering degree, a master's degree, and so I am a very analytical person, and I think there is a lot to be found in data and in research. And so, but there's a balance there, right? Like you can wear all the wearables in the world, and you can get all the metrics and the data in the world, but like, what is the story that it's telling you, and are you really paying attention to that data? And so that's really kind of where I was able to deep dive. I kind of lucked out that right before the Olympic Games, because the Paris Olympic marathon course was so hilly, I kind of made a statement actually on a podcast once saying that the person that even efforts the Olympic marathon is going to have the best day. And, if they don't, you kind of got to ignore pace. And so it's like, okay, how do you even effort run the Olympic marathon? And that's when I made that statement. Company called Stryd reached out to me, and they were like, hey, like, have you ever considered running based off of power? And power is really big in the cycling world. It's this effort-based system, that kind of takes into account wind and hills and grade and percentages, and essentially, instead of running off of pace, you can run off of a critical power, or what your marathon power would be. And I was like really fascinated by the idea. And so right before the Olympic Games, maybe a month or two, I started wearing these little pods, these Stryd pods that I would put on my foot. And not only would they, give me live data to my watch to tell me my power, and to tell me, okay, I need to, if I could average, 390 watts or 400 watts for the entire marathon, and make sure I'm kind of in that zone and not pushing too hard or pushing too slow, then I can even effort run the marathon. And, that's where kind of my baseline of data started. And what ended up being really valuable is, now that I've worn these Stryd pods since, August of, 2024, I now have this baseline of data. And something else that the Stryd pod does is it tracks all your biomechanics. So it, has your impact loading rate, your ground contact time, your foot path essentially through time or 3D space. And all of these data can essentially tell you, okay, how was I training at a healthy state? And essentially, what are the biomechanics that led to me getting injured? And then now that I'm injured, what are the signs that we need to see as I return to form, so that way we know that I'm on the right path and don't go through another injury cycle? And so this data has been like incredibly valuable. Like, yeah, we've reviewed it all along from a power standpoint and been like, oh yeah, at the Olympic Games, your critical power was this much, and you improved by, 3% at New York, and then 2% at Boston, and so on and so forth. And it's been really cool to see that progression from like a performance standpoint. But now we've been able to actually use the data more from like an injury standpoint and see like, oh, Clayton, your left foot, pre-Olympic Games or pre-injury, has this amount of ground contact time. And now after your injury, because you had an ankle injury, like, you're spending way less time on the ground, and it's absorbing so much more force now. And, that's something that we need to be careful of as you get back into shape and as you're going through this injury. And it's really been cool to see, as my metrics have returned back to, pre-injury and like pre 2024, early 2025 Clayton. And that's been super valuable. And so that's like one of the lessons that I've definitely learned that we'll definitely monitor as we go into the Olympic Games is, and into this next like Olympic cycle is, okay, what are my metrics looking like? Both from like a performance standpoint with Stryd, but then also from, like I said, a biomechanics standpoint. That's been very valuable. And then I think the other one is kind of this lesson that I shared with you earlier of like, once again, like, you have to own your injuries. Like, it's up to you to understand them fully and deeply, and to seek the help that you need, and to put in the work. And no one's going to do it for you, and no one's going to care as much as you do. And specifically with this ankle injury, like, we were able to solve a lot of the problems, but is some like lifelong damage there. And so now I know exactly what I need to do, so that way it never happens again. And what's really fascinating too is, like, I've never had a bone injury in my career. I've always had soft tissue injuries, and one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that, like, yes, you have to take time off for a bone injury, but for these soft tissue injuries, it's like there has to be work put in order to see results and to see change, on a ligament and tendon, a ligament level and a tendon level, and even muscle and imbalances. And, it can be easy in an injury to kind of default and to kind of like play the victim and just say, I'm just going to take time off and let it heal. And there is some truth to that, like backing off on mileage and training. But there's also, like I said, some certain amount of work that needs to be put in. So those are probably the big three lessons.
How confident are you moving forward about no more major injuries, or at least ones in relation to the one that just happened?
Yeah, I would say, like I said, this ankle injury has kind of been lingering since 2017, and it's something that I've dealt with. And like, if I had to name my big three injuries, it's my left ankle, it's my Achilles, and it's my high right hamstring. And I feel like I've now like those are ones that have bothered me for a long majority of my career, and I now know how to handle those injuries. And so um, I think there is something really cool about the marathon that like it can be really hard to train for the marathon initially, but then once everything is humming and you understand your body, um, you know, the sky's the limit. And I don't know, knock on wood, like I hope I have no more big injuries, but I do feel really confident in my ability to navigate them now on a deeper level, deeper than I ever have before. And that is in and of itself like a skill to marathoning, right? Is to be able to train healthily and listen to your body and to adapt. And um, yeah, I think it's also been really valuable to like relearn how to cross train and to try to stay fit. Um, and it's also been really valuable. Like there was a time where I was almost cross training too much. And I felt like metabolically, I was putting myself in a giant deficit so that my body didn't have the fuel to heal. And so even going through that lesson, right? Like if I do introduce cross training from an injury standpoint down the road, like understanding that you got to fuel the body and like metabolically, you got to be in a good state. So that way your body has the energy to heal. Like that's just so many little lessons learned. The real trick is remembering them. It's easy to forget.
Especially when things are going well, you're like, okay, I no longer need to pay attention. Bro, you got to talk to, I don't know if they're still neighbors, but Connor's neighbor. Do you know about Connor's neighbor?
Which one? He's got a couple
Okay.
that
Her
are
name's
pretty.
Kelsey Poulter, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was on a podcast with her, and she's a hot shot on social media. So, like, it took her some convincing to get on the podcast. Like, she'd
Yeah.
always be like, "I'm so busy, circle back with me." Finally got her on, and I like didn't know she like knew running, so I think I used Connor as an example for something. And
Yeah.
she was like, "Oh, that's my neighbor," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what are the odds?" But that podcast to this day is one of the best performing. She knows her stuff nutrition
She,
wise. Yeah, super nice person
yeah.
too.
Yeah. I love her. Like, I love her audience that she's speaking to. Like, she simplifies things so down to like real practical application instead of getting off into the weeds too much. And yeah, it's funny. Like, Connor has a couple superstars in his neighborhood. I think he's also got like one of BYU's former running backs in his neighborhood that's like a superstar and was in the NFL briefly. Anyway,
Good day to be Connor Mance's neighborhood. Bunch of
yeah.
studs.
And for
They
the record,
probably
I don't
they
live in
pro-
Connor Mines neighborhood.
yeah. They probably say the same thing about Connor Mance. That's a funny thing. They're probably like, oh,
Yeah.
next to American record holder. So speaking of some of the Stryd data and this kind of background, being a data nerd, have
Yeah.
you utilized like Claude or ChatGPT to break down like mass forms of data? Even last night, I started wearing a Whoop I was wearing a Whoop for about a year, and then I stopped, and recently they sent me another one, so I started using it again. And I mean, it was remarkable to pull the data from the 2 months, put it into Claude, and have it deeply analyze it. It's crazy what these models can do. So have you used AI at all to help you with training or like getting back to health?
You know, I have done like for example, I've exported all of my Strava data and been able to like import essentially all of my marathons side by side to be able to analyze workouts and to be able to compare, okay, when I was 16 weeks out for all of my marathons, where was I at fitness wise? And then where was I at, 8 weeks out, this is where I was at. So that way it's kind of a good gut check for me. Like, oh, I remember this build, I was maybe a little bit too fit too soon, or this build, I was coming back. And, that's been really, really valuable to kind of analyze that. Uh, each build has gotten better and better almost it seems. But trying to piece together why and what are the strengths of those, like that's one of the big ways that I've used AI for sure. Um, from like a Stryd standpoint, like they have such powerful tools within the Stryd Power Center itself that like I haven't had to really export it out. So for example, one of the features that I find that's really cool is you can essentially compare this month's data to this month's data at whatever pace you want. So like you take, okay, my race pace is usually between 4:45 and 5-minute pace, and I'll click on that and I'll compare different months, and it will give me a complete breakdown of all of my biomechanics, left and right. So that way I can see, oh, this was the month before I was injured at this pace, and this is the month after. And I love comparing both race pace and, my easy mileage pace. And, the tools that they have within Power Center are just really complex and really specific, that, yeah, it's like every data nerd's dream. I've also, I've been wearing Koros since 2019, and I've been wearing Whoop since I'm a founding member, actually, like 2017, 18.
Wow.
And so that data has been really cool to pull in as well. And to when you talk about, this comparison of marathon builds, one of the things that I've done is also pulled in all of my HRV data and how it corresponds from week to week throughout all of these builds. And it's really interesting when you look at HRV data, how, what's funny is my HRV data was the lowest it's ever been, which for those that don't know, HRV data is heart rate variability. Lower is bad, higher is good. And, throughout my injury, I hit a rock bottom of 30 or 40, which for me is incredibly low. And it's been really cool the last even 4 weeks to see me jump from 30 or 40s to the 50s to the 60s to now the 70s. And, how is that on par with previous marathon builds and where I'm at in marathon builds? Because usually my HRV will peak right before my race. And you would think that with high amounts of training that your HRV would suffer. But for me, it's actually a very good indicator of fitness. And so that's been really cool to follow. So that's kind of how I've used data as well. Like I said, this big compile, I call it marathon comparison, where I compare essentially my Whoop data, my Strava data, my Koros data. I haven't been able to figure out how to incorporate Stryd from a really there's so much data with Stryd that incorporating that would almost needs to live by itself. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. It's kind of fun.
If you had to, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, what's funny sometimes though, is I'll talk to Connor, I'll talk to coach. I'll be like, because coach is such a creature of habit almost. And every build builds into the next build. I'm often sometimes as well, comparison can be a blessing and a curse. And so it's oh yeah, 3 builds ago, we did this workout and we did it at this pace. And sometimes Connor and coach were we can't remember those glory days of what it was like on that perfect weather day with that perfect workout right before the Olympic Games. We need to essentially set a new standard. So I have had to be really careful with comparison.
If you could pick one data point that you've taken from over the years, what is the, if I was Clayton, I'm going to take everything away from you, but you can have one, what would it be?
Man, that's a good question. If I will say, a lot of the data shows that the number one indicator of marathon performance is mileage. Now, that being said, I think I probably would have actually a pretty good pulse of mileage if you took that away. But and I almost hate to say that because I don't know. Mileage is so time consuming. It beats up the body, and it just is so, it almost simplifies what is the beauty of running a marathon, but it is so true. Mileage is the biggest indicator of marathon performance. And so being able to track that might be very, very important. Yeah. If I had to choose one that was a little bit more, one of my dreams one day, we talk about, these recovery tools that we have and this HRV data. it is funny that like it'll give me, you know, a recovery. Like HRV is an indicator of recovery. And what's ironic is I've never really been able to train off of these recovery metrics simply because, you know, I have a coach and a coach will tell me what to do. And it's like, it's kind of a non-negotiable. Like I like the HRV and the recovery scores to be able to like have a good gut check. But at the same time, like I've never been able to train purely off of what, you know, HRV or resting heart rate or sleep data has told me. And I think it would be really fascinating to actually train purely off of those metrics. And like, what would happen if I actually did actually listen to what those metrics told me? And, you know, I would only be able to run X amount of miles per my recovery metrics. Would I get faster? Like, would it actually be a good way to train? It's almost like training with power instead of with pace or with mileage. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that because, like I said, I have a coach, and you know what coach says is what I try to do. But yeah, it's always been kind of an interesting thought I've always wanted to try.
AI coach, it's going to be the future. I had a fascinating conversation with Jack Mullaney, who coaches NAZ Elite.
Yeah.
And I brought up these subjects. I don't know how fully comfortable he was. He might listen to this, so I love you, Jack, if you're listening. I got the sense from him that he's at least, as should most coaches be, like sort of anti-AI. But I was like, one of my favorite things with guests I'll do sometimes is I'll like chat GPT different things. And so with him, I was like, I asked the AI some question about, you know, Jack Mullaney specifically, of like, would it ever replace someone like him? And it was basically like, they can get the technicalities down to a T, but it'll never replace like the human athlete relationship. So I actually think the future is going to be, these mass wearables, and then a coach gets all the data, they kind of plug it in to their athlete. But they're the ones delivering and tweaking. But I honestly don't see a reality where AI wouldn't beat the best human coach. I just don't. I think humans know emotion, so I think they can tweak things off of AI. But if they're getting mass inputs of data from your Garmin, your Stryd, Coros, Whoop, whatever it might be, and more technologies that come out, I mean, like lactate testing, I think it's it's going to be an arms race in the NCAA. Like, I'm actually fascinated to see how it revolutionizes the sport. It'd be fascinating.
Totally. Especially this next generation of coaches. Like, kind of like you said, like Coach Istone is very much the same way. I remember when I first started wearing the Whoop in like 2018 or so. And it was because I kept burning out at the end of these track seasons. And I was like, oh man, I wonder if I like really followed, you know, these recovery metrics, if I would not burn out. And, anyway, Coach Istone, I remember him always making this comment. He's like, do you really need a device to tell you if you're recovered or not? Like, or can you just like kind of have an internal gauge? And every morning to this day, like I still will like think, okay, what do I think my HRV is, or my, like, how recovered do I think I am? And then I'll check my Coros and be like, oh, like my HRV is spot on where I thought I would be. And so I think you can train yourself and you can govern yourself. But yeah, I think the Coros training hub is actually really cool. Like the coaching ability. I don't know if you ever really dived into that, but there was a time when Coros actually wanted to work directly with BYU and like, okay, yeah, let's get all the athletes' watches. And then this training hub is where Coach Istone could see all of the metrics of all of his athletes. Wow. And be able to make coaching decisions based off of the data. And, you know, like I said, Coach Istone's a little bit old school. And so I don't think it would have really worked.
He's so old school. Yeah. After I had him on the podcast, he sent me, I love him to death. He sent me a podcast. He was shocked I hadn't gone to college. And he sent me like a paragraph text about how he still thinks I could use education and the value of going to college. And I was like, you're great, man. Never change. This is awesome.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, his wife has a PhD. He has a master's. All 6 of his daughters have like upper level degrees. Anyway, like, so yeah, he's big on
he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe I didn't go to college. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Do you find it hard to not over compare yourself with these mass amounts of data? Because the argument I've heard against even using, like Coach Milt at UNC, he wouldn't let his athletes use GPS watches at times of seasons or things. I think I'm getting that fact right. Because he didn't want them overly comparing or overly reading into heart rate if it was off or something. And that's just a GPS watch. You're factoring in two different devices. Do you ever find it hard to not over compare?
Yeah, I think kind of like I was kind of explaining earlier, like comparing marathon to marathon build, you can kind of get into this trap of trying to continually set workout bests. And instead of running the race in the race, you're running the race in practice. And so there is, I think, this balance of, being able to control the data. And I think that's one of the blessings and curses of Strava, right? Not only are you comparing yourself to yourself, but you're also comparing yourself to all your peers and your teammates and your competitors. And so I've had to take steps in the past of just like being really careful with not only my own comparison, but the comparison of other athletes. And like making sure I stay in my own lane. I do really love like the Sarah Hall mentality. Like, you know how she'll get to like mile 20 and she'll just take her watch off and chuck it into the crowd. And like, she's probably lost half a dozen watches at this point because of it. And, but I think that's like kind of a cool mentality, because there is a point in every race. There's a point in every workout. There's almost a point in every season when you do just have to like, just do what needs to be done. You need to get to the finish line as fast as possible. There is no pacing. There is no power. It's just get to the finish line as fast as possible. And I think maybe I do like the idea of maybe in the off seasons of this idea of not looking at the watch. But to be honest, like, is taking away the data from the athlete is it's like, are you really helping the athlete? Or like, how do I say this? I think of my daughters and like how they want dessert every night. And it's like, if you control that, then what are they going to do when you're not there? And what are they going to do when they do need to make a decision for themselves? And at the end of the day, I think that's the same thing with data. Like, the power is within you to make the choice to do with the data with what you wish. And if you take that away, like, what's going to happen when you have the data back? Like, it's just, are you going to be even in a worse position? Are you going to spiral more? And I'm not saying dessert is bad. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, you're talking to the guy that always says, rule number 1, eat. Rule number 2, eat good food, right? Like, I had ice cream last night, right? Like, I think, but there is this point at which, like, you have to be responsible for yourself and you have to take ownership. And that's something that we teach my daughters every day. And that's with screen time and that's with desserts. And it's like, we don't control those things. Like, we set boundaries, but ultimately really we put it back on them and say, well, what do you think? What do you want? And that allows them not only to have self-control when their parents are around, but when their parents are not around. And I think it's the same with an athlete and data. And I think that's one of the beauties actually of Coach Eystone, is he's an incredibly, almost frustratingly hands-off coach sometimes. And sometimes you want him to micromanage and to tell you to, get rid of your watch or to get rid of your device or, but ultimately, like, it's really made me the athlete I am, because now I'm incredibly independent and I can control my own narrative, my own data, my own training to a very high level. And, now Coach Eystone just gets to, like you said, be the human element and gets to understand me as an athlete and guide me and be my mentor more so than a dictator or a coach.
Real quick, wrapping up on time here. I want to be respectful of your time, but I did want to ask you this question. I've never seen this in the sport of running before, where it seems that ASICS, your sponsor, massive kudos to them. I don't know too many people internally there, but if they're listening, massive kudos to you guys. They formed this sort of partnership with you to launch this YouTube channel. I don't know the ins and outs, so you can provide transparency, but it solved the key issue in the sport, which is like storytelling of the athletes, sort of the F1 stuff I was talking about. And it seemed that you just garnered this whole new cult-like fan base of like, oh, watch Clayton's video this week, like get the ins, the outs. If we could do that for every athlete, running would be just as big, if not bigger than most sports. I believe that. So can you speak as someone who really got to experience documenting your life and being with a sponsor who was, you know, really supportive of that. I don't know who made what call, but it seemed like they're really in on that.
Yeah, yeah, it's been what we're now what 30 plus episodes deep, and it's been quite the journey. And yeah, big props to ASICS for sure in investing in that initial docuseries. You know, it was kind of a dream and a vision that I've had for a long time to document my journey. You know, I have countless uh, video clips and GoPro footage and everything from even my college days and my early pro days that just never got to YouTube, right? That never got to the audience. But ultimately, what ended up happening is I had a good friend that approached me and said, you know, his name's Andrew Storr, and he's like, hey, I think that your journey to the Olympic Games is going to be huge and that we should document it. And so we shot actually the first two episodes kind of on a hope. and and we thought that, you know, if we shot those two episodes, we then could pitch that to sponsors and see what would happen. And we were kind of lucky. And I think Andrew, who's a phenomenal videographer and storyteller, like was able to really paint the picture. And that coupled with me making the Olympic team and just my, I guess, vulnerability and openness to the camera, really was able to make what is now the docu-series, right? And it's been cool because now we've now had all sorts of sponsors, whether that's Stryd or Core, and we'll have other sponsors in the future and nutrition sponsors and things like that. But it's been neat to see how the community has rallied around that. And yeah, we've kind of been in the dark the last 3 or 4 months actually with the docu-series because of the injury and because of some other reasons. But we hope to be able to start it again soon and do just a mini series to Boston. Not a day goes by that I don't get like a DM or a message or a comment that says, "Hey, Clayton, where's the Boston docu-series? Like, where's it at?" And it's just kind of funny because, yeah, if only you knew like the nuances and like all of the work that goes into putting these together. Um, it's a lot of work, and don't worry, it is coming, and it is worth it. I will tell you that it is definitely worth it. And what was interesting too is like my first motivation in actually documenting this was more so like because I wanted to remember this journey to the Olympic Games, and not that like I don't know if I really want to put it on my girls to remember that. Like I don't know if I want them to be like, I don't know. I don't want to say that I'm like that narcissistic, but like I wanted to capture that moment. And I wanted to do it in a way that I was proud, that I would go back and I'd watch it and like be proud of like the premium quality that it was made, and that it would really tell a story in a deep way that was like 100% authentic and true. And it was really early on actually in the process that I realized like, if I'm not myself on this docuseries, it's never going to hit and it's never going to last. And it's not something that I could sustain. And so that was something that I really embraced early on. And luckily like the rest of the world did too. And yeah, like we're constantly figuring out how to enhance it and elevate it. And yeah, I'm excited for the series to come. It is interesting, like now that we've done 30 episodes or more, like they've gotten better and better and better. But it's also like you guys already have a really good insight into I guess my life and like what it takes. And so like how do we keep it fresh and how do we keep it relatable, and how do we like continue to relate to the everyday runner? And I think that's been probably one of the most rewarding things in this process is that there's been so many people that have been like, hey, I finally gotten back into running because of your docuseries. Or, you know, I ran in high school, but I took some time off and now I signed up for my first marathon or my first half marathon. Or, hey, I never knew running could be fun, but then I saw your docuseries and now like I'm getting into running for the first time. Or like these younger generations, like these high school and junior high kids that are like just inspired by it. And it's not something that I ever imagined. And so it's been really, really rewarding, to be honest. And yeah, I hope we get to continue to do so.
I think the running world craves, because it's so limited, the type of content you're producing. So I think it'll only continue to be successful. And if I was your manager or business manager, I'd say keep it up, because now you're viewed in an entirely different lens in the running world. You're not just someone that they hear from the day before a race on a YouTube, press release video at a press conference. You're someone that is relatable and, has journeyed with people. And I know the shoe companies, it makes you so much more valuable. So I think it's incredibly smart. Love what you're doing. Final question here, man. Talked close to 6 years ago. In that conversation, it was right after your first NCAA title. And it seemed like you and kind of Rory were the ones who started to kind of re-put BYU back on the map. And what's been really cool, Clayton, over the last 6 years is I've talked to probably close to a dozen different BYU athletes, Coach Istone, and they almost always reference you and Connor. And not even, specifically like they train with you every day, although some run with you guys frequently, but just the impact you had on the program. Most recently, Taven Kitchen, true freshman, runs 13:19, absolute dog, was crazy good in high school. I think he's the future of the NCAA. And he's referencing you and Connor and the impact you have, not just on BYU, but Provo. Wrapping this one up, what does it mean? Because I know your church means a lot to you. I know that program, that school means a ton to you. What does it mean to actually have left such a deep legacy in Provo and at BYU?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a question I face every day. We're on campus just about every day and still get to rub shoulders with the team and see what they're doing to continue to represent, the university and what we believe in. And it is interesting to I sometimes still have imposter syndrome. It's like, man, do I still get to deserve to be on campus? Do I still get to deserve to have a locker room and enjoy the sauna? But yeah, it's not something that you ever plan for or imagine. But it has been really, really rewarding. Like the other day, I was in the office, the track office, and I was hearing about some of the recruits that were coming in that weekend or in the next couple of days. And it's like, these are kids that are, the top kids in the country that want to come and at least visit BYU. And they're not even members of the church. And I think that's amazing to me, that we've built a program that is so prestigious and that so many people want to be a part of, both from a college standpoint, but then now this whole pro standpoint, that it's just really cool that other people are recognizing it, even those that are not members of the church. And really one of the big missions of BYU is to do good and to I guess serve people and then teach as many people about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so if this is one way, one small way, for people, I'm not saying that people that come to BYU have to be members of the church or that they have to, join the church, but if they can just rub shoulders and learn more about Jesus Christ and be with a group of guys that just want to do good in the world, and, be dads and be fathers and run fast. That's amazing. And I'm really, really proud of that. And it's kind of fascinating to me because, in high school, I joined the American Fork High School team as a freshman. I moved from Washington to Utah. And at that time, American Fork wasn't on the map at all. And in my time, it became what is now known as, the powerhouse of American Fork High School. My freshman year, we took second at state. And then after that, they've now won 12, 13 state championships in a row. And they've been to NXN almost every year. And I got to see the dynasty born at American Fork. And you could almost say I got to see and be part of what is the dynasty that was born at BYU, right? And now we're kind of seeing the dynasty of what is being born as the professional group. It was just me for a long time with Jared Ward and a few random guys. And now Connor Mance obviously went pro. And then pretty soon now we have all these people from outside of Utah and outside of BYU that want to join. And you could say the dynasty of what is, Ed Istone elite and, Coach Taylor is being born, and it's been really cool to witness that. And I'm really excited for what this next phase is of, what is the next program that I get to be a part of, that I get to see and be a part of and grow. And it really all comes down to like this culture, right? This culture of belief and building each other up and teamwork and inspiring the next generation. And so, yeah, it's been really cool to be a part of, and it's been fun to reflect on. And I will say it definitely, like, I don't want to say that I'm the only one that's been a part of it. Like you've mentioned Rory, you've mentioned Coach Eystone, Jared Ward, like I think of Timo Mostert, I think of Derek Day, I think of Robbie Lee, like these big mentors in high school, college, and now as pros that have been part of this. And it's really, really amazing to be a part of.
Well, to your first point there, I've always had so much respect for the LDS community, and I'm personally Catholic. But what I can say about these types of religions and my experience in talking to a lot of people from Provo is, if you're listening and you're not a part of anything, like the principles of these faiths are something everyone should adopt. And the simple one at the top is love your neighbor more than you love yourself, and serve your neighbor. And if the U.S. and the world had that point of view in perspective, I don't think we need to go to the wars we go to and to have the division we have. I think there would be a lot more love and joy and peace in the world. So minimally from that perspective, I think, even if you're listening today and turned off by the faith or specific faith, I think the principles boil down to loving your neighbor more than yourself. Can't get better than that. And if you disagree with that, man, I don't even know where to start with you.
Amen. I totally agree.
Well, wrapping this up, Clayton, thank you for your time. I hope and I pray I have improved in the last 6 years. Episode 700 something was better than episode 2. But again, thanks for taking a chance on me back in the day. And thanks for your raw honesty, vulnerability in this conversation. I wish you all the best. Prayers for continued recovery and health. And I'm stoked to see you back out there soon, man.
Appreciate it, Dominic. Thanks for having me.